God! 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 Someone would be 10,000.
From a kid arguing with a judge over his phone to another mocking a victim's mother, the actions of these kids in the courtroom will undoubtedly frustrate you. One of the wildest moments involved 18-year-old William Demopoulos in Berea, Ohio. Attending a probation hearing for charges including criminal damage, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, and obstructing justice, William turned what should have been a routine court appearance into a dramatic confrontation. When Judge Chris Green asked him to hand over his phone to his probation officer, William flat out refused, gripping it as if it were more valuable than his freedom. Despite the judge calmly explaining the rules of probation, William stubbornly argued back, escalating the situation. His defiance pushed the judge's patience to the limit, ultimately leading to him being held in contempt of court and taken into custody on the spot.
On probation, your probation officer has the right to take anything they want to take of yours. If they want to search your phone, they search your phone. Problem is, you don't want to play by anybody's rules. You want to play by your own rules. Not like that.
But William wasn't having it. He tried to defend himself, insisting, "It's not like that, but let's be real. It was exactly like that." At this point, the judge had enough and ordered the deputies to cuff him. That's when everything spiraled out of control. Instead of calmly accepting his fate, William jumped onto the courtroom table as if he were about to stage a dramatic escape. However, his plan didn't last long. Officers immediately grabbed him and pulled him down before he could go anywhere. The chaotic few seconds sealed his fate, and the judge wasn't about to let it slide. In response to his outburst, the judge revoked his probation, added a resisting arrest charge, and sentenced him to 40 days in jail. Just like that, William's refusal to hand over his phone turned a simple probation hearing into a trip straight to jail. But if you think this case was crazy, let's head down to Miami, Florida, to the Miami-Dade Circuit Court, where another teen, Penelope Stowe, learned the hard way that disrespecting the court comes with serious consequences.
Someone would be 10,000.
Penelope Stowe's case began when she was caught with Xanax, a controlled substance, landing her in front of Judge Jorge Rodriguez Chomat on February 4, 2013. From the moment she stepped into the courtroom, her attitude made it clear that trouble was coming.
Good morning, Ms. Soto. You're being charged with possession of Xanax and BARS. I don't know what that is. What is that?
Xanax bars, that's how they're referred to.
Xanax bars.
The hearing began with routine questions about her financial situation, but Penelope couldn't help herself. She responded with a snarky tone and a laugh, treating the whole proceeding like a joke. When asked if she owned any valuable assets, she casually listed off items, including jewelry she claimed was worth a lot of money. However, the judge remained clearly unimpressed.
How much would you say your jewelry is worth? It's not a joke, you know. We are not in a club now.
Okay, but it's
we are not in a club. Be serious about it.
I'm serious about it.
You're being very. I can see you're serious, all right.
You just made me laugh. I apologize.
But her erratic behavior told a different story. When Judge Rodriguez Chomat set her bond at $5,000, Penelope smirked, laughed, and walked away, muttering an obscene gesture under her breath. The judge wasn't about to let that slide. He immediately called her back and doubled her bond to $10,000, making it crystal clear who was in charge.
How much is your jewelry worth?
It's worth a lot of money.
Like what?
Like Rick Ross.
Huh?
It's worth
Ma'am,
money.
have you had any kind of drugs in the last 24 hours?
Actually, no.
But even after her bond was raised to $10,000, Penelope still didn't stop. As she walked off again, she shouted a profanity at the judge. That was the last straw. Without hesitation, Judge Rodriguez Chomat found her in direct criminal contempt and sentenced her to 30 days in county jail.
Come back, ma'am. Come back. Come back. Give me the paper again. Count one would be 10,000.
But Soto.
Oh, you did say that? I find you in direct criminal contempt. 30 days in the county jail. The wild exchange was all caught on camera, and before Penelope even realized what was happening, the footage went viral. People couldn't believe Her audacity and the clip became one of the most talked about courtroom moments ever. However, 2 days later, the court showed some leniency and reduced her bond back to $5,000. When she returned
I find you in direct criminal contempt.
to court 4 days later, she was a completely different person, sincerely apologizing for her behavior and calling it irrational.
Oh, you did say that? I find you in direct criminal contempt. 30 days in the county.
Judge Rodriguez Chomat, seeing Penelope's genuine remorse, decided to give her another chance. He revoked her sentence and instead ordered her to complete a drug program. A year later, she successfully finished the program and her drug charges were dropped. This moment wasn't just a lesson for Penelope, it became a cautionary tale for anyone who thinks they can disrespect a courtroom and get away with it. Next up is Nicholas Lindsay, a teenager who was sentenced 3 times yet remained unfazed, even smiling in court. It all started back in 2011 in Florida when Officer David Crawford, a beloved cop with 25 years on the force, responded to what seemed like a routine burglary report. As Crawford pulled up and stepped out of his car with nothing but a notepad in hand, he was met by Nicholas, a 16-year-old armed with a gun he had bought for $140. What happened next was gut-wrenching. Nicholas panicked and fired 5 shots, killing Officer Crawford on the spot. The officer wasn't even armed. He was simply doing his job. Fast forward to court, and Nicholas was charged with first-degree murder. Since he was only 16, the legal system treated him differently due to his age. But let's be real, his crime was brutal. Initially, he was sentenced to life without parole.
Behavior was very irrational, and I apologize not only to the court and you, but to my family.
Later, thanks to a Supreme Court ruling that prohibited automatic life sentences for juveniles, Nicholas's case was revisited. But here's where it gets wild. Every time he was in court, he acted completely unfazed, even grinning while the judge handed down life sentences. No exaggeration. The judge was delivering a heavy statement about the pain Nicholas had caused, and he just sat there like it was no big deal. Watching his reaction, Officer Crawford's daughter, Amanda, couldn't hold back her feelings, bluntly calling him an animal.
The sentence review hearing after 25 years is the only proper sentence.
Oh, and it doesn't stop there. His lawyers pushed for a lighter sentence, maybe 40 years, arguing that he was trying to turn his life around in prison. They pointed out that he had earned his GED and taken a few classes, hoping to paint a picture of rehabilitation.
And I'm glad it's over, and it just kind of proves to me that he's an animal as he sat there smiling.
And it doesn't stop there. His lawyers argued for a lighter sentence, possibly 40 years, claiming he was making an effort to turn his life around in prison. They pointed out that he had earned his GED and taken a few classes, hoping to present him as someone on the path to rehabilitation.
The court decided was that juveniles, people under the age of 18 that commit a crime, don't have the same mental capacity to think like adults. Therefore, they should be treated differently.
And here's the thing. This case didn't just affect Nicholas or Officer Crawford's family. It shook the entire community. Even the mayor, who had previously met Nicholas during an outreach program, was heartbroken. He had believed the kid had potential, only to see it all come crashing down. Then there was Nicholas's mother, a truly tough situation. After hearing the suspect description, she suspected her son might be involved and made him turn himself in. Can you imagine being a mother in that moment, realizing your child had committed something so horrific and having to watch him confess?
That this type of violent behavior will stop.
At the end of the day, Nicholas sealed his own fate. 3 sentencing hearings later, he still acted like he didn't care. Honestly, it's just a sad, tragic story. A kid's reckless choices destroyed so many lives, including his own. Next up is a case that will genuinely infuriate you, the story of the Buffalo mass shooter, Peyton Gendron. It all unfolded in Erie County Court, Buffalo, New York.
Judge ordered, so that's what it is. It is what it is.
Judge Susan Egan didn't hold back at all. She looked the 19-year-old directly in the eye and told him exactly what he needed to hear.
From start to finish.
You gonna come to our city and decide you don't like this.
Right from the start, Judge Susan Egan made it clear this wasn't going to be a soft hearing. But things took an even more intense turn when Barbara Massey, the sister of Catherine Massey, one of Gendron's victims, stood up to speak. Her Victim impact statement was powerful and direct, calling him out for coming into their city with the intent of targeting Black people.
You will never see the light of day as a free man ever again.
Then, out of nowhere, chaos erupted. Just as Barbara was wrapping up her statement, one of her family members couldn't hold it in any longer. He lunged straight at Gendron. In the background, someone could be heard yelling, "Don't do it!" But it was too late. Court guards immediately jumped in, restraining the man and rushing Gendron out of the room. The entire courtroom seemed to need a moment to breathe, forcing the judge to pause the proceedings to restore order. Amid the tension, the hearing was filled with heartbreaking statements. Kimberly Suter, the widow of Aaron Suter Jr., the security guard who had bravely tried to stop Gendron, arrived wearing red and black in honor of her late husband. When she stood up to speak, she read from the Bible, delivering a powerful message that could move anyone to tears.
Lord, who is like you, delivering the poor from him who is too strong for him. Yes, the poor and the needy from him who plunders them.
Then there was Wayne Jones, whose mother, Celestine Cheney, was one of the victims. He spoke about the overwhelming grief he felt, admitting that he had shed tears just while writing his statement. Wearing a cross with his mother's photo on it, he poured out his heartbreak, expressing the deep pain of losing her to such senseless violence.
To me, killing you is the easy way out. One day, I hope you find it in your heart to apologize to those 10 families who you've shattered their lives for some senseless, unnecessary business that you had going on with yourself.
One of the survivors, Christopher Braden, a TOPS employee, shared the horrifying details of that day. He recounted the moment he was shot and described witnessing victims being killed. Even after the shooting had ended, he saw where they had fallen, images that haunt him every single night. The trauma he carries is unimaginable.
I actually saw a few victims being killed. As I was being taken out of the store after the shooting was over, I saw all the victims where they lay. The visions haunt me in my sleep every night and most days. I cannot get those memories out of my head.
Gendron did address the court, if you can even call it that. He apologized, admitting that he had deliberately targeted Black people because of his racist beliefs. But there were no excuses. He fully acknowledged that the attack was premeditated. He had scouted the supermarket twice before the shooting, worn tactical gear, and even live-streamed the massacre on Twitch. It was sickening, and it also highlighted a larger issue, how social media played a role in radicalizing him. Platforms like 4chan had filled his head with extremist content, and Twitch allowed him to broadcast the attack in real time. New York. Attorney General Letitia James even released a report condemning these platforms, with some arguing they should be held accountable for fueling such hatred. In the end, Gendron got exactly what he deserved. He was sentenced to life in prison for each of the 10 people he killed, along with an additional 75 years for the 3 he wounded. Judge Egan didn't mince words when she told him exactly what she thought of his actions.
Come to our city and decide you don't like Black people. Man, you don't know a damn thing about Black people.
Alyssa was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole, plus 30 years for the armed criminal during a robbery. But what truly shocked everyone wasn't just the crime itself. It was his complete lack of remorse. Back in October 2016, Jordan's body was discovered near the Pine Lake Village Cooperative. It turned out that Dante, along with 2 other teens, Marius Ellison and Delino Gracie, had attempted to rob Jordan for clothes, shoes, and drugs. Things escalated, and Dante ended up shooting Jordan in what became a coup during a robbery. But what truly shocked everyone wasn't just the crime itself. It was his complete lack of remorse. Back in October 2016, Jordan's body was discovered near the Pine Lake Village Cooperative. It turned out that Dante, along with 2 other teens, Marius Ellison and Delino Gracie, had attempted to rob Jordan for clothes, shoes, and drugs. Things escalated, and Dante ended up shooting Jordan in what became a simply hearing his voice. It was absolutely heartbreaking.
No place for you or your ignorant, hateful, and evil ideologies in a civilized society.
But here's the thing. While this grieving mother poured out her pain, Dante sat there smirking, as if none of it even mattered. His complete lack of remorse was impossible to ignore, and the judge wasn't having it. He called out Dante's attitude, outright condemning his behavior as disgusting.
Prison for the rest of your life, that means you'll die there.
In the end, Jordan's family chose to stick with the plea deal, likely because they wanted some form of closure. As a result, Dante was sentenced to 23 to 50 years for armed robbery, second-degree murder, and conspiracy, plus an additional 2 years for a gun charge. But here's the kicker. Because of the deal, several other charges were dropped, including one for a gang-related shooting in 2015. And when it was finally Dante's turn to speak, he didn't offer an apology. All he said was,
"There'll never be an answer good enough to satisfy why you shot my son. Why you thought that what you had should be yours. Why you felt that what you wanted, you were entitled to. Why you thought his death was an acceptable response to your jealousy or desire to what he had. Drugs."
Nothing for Jordan's family. It might have been an attempt to play the insanity card for a lighter sentence, but if that was the plan, it completely failed. After the sentencing, Dante's mother, Antoinette, spoke up, claiming that the system had ignored his mental health issues. She seemed more upset about her son going to prison than the fact that he had taken someone's life. She said,
Watching you sit there, smile and laugh and shake your head like this was no big deal, I'm very tempted to just say, I'm not going to accept this sentence agreement. We'll go to trial, and if you're convicted of felony murder, you'll go to prison for the rest of your life. That means you'll die.
It was hard to watch, especially knowing everything the Klee family had already endured. This case truly lingers in the mind, not just because of the terrible crime itself, but because of the complete lack of empathy shown. Committing such an act is one thing, but displaying no remorse at all takes it to another level of heartlessness. It's a chilling reminder, much like the story of Damon Kemp, that leaves you questioning how someone so young could turn to such violence.
I just want to tell y'all, I'll be home soon. R.I.P. Keon, I love my family.
Damon Kemp, a 19-year-old former Bethune-Cookman University student, was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms after brutally murdering his 2 teenage roommates in December 2018. Originally from Stone Mountain, Georgia, Kemp seemed like an average college student when he enrolled in Daytona Beach. But beneath the surface, things were far from normal. He met Trey Ingram, a talented young boxer with a heart of gold who went out of his way to help Kemp when he was struggling. Trey even invited Kemp to live in his apartment rent-free, giving him a chance to get back on his feet. A simple act of kindness that would ultimately lead to Trey's tragic death. Over time, tensions between Kemp and his roommates escalated. What began as minor disagreements turned into something much darker as Kemp's behavior spiraled out of control. Then, on December 7, 2018, everything reached a breaking point. In a sudden burst of rage, Kemp shot and killed both Trey and his friend Jordan Payton, who had been visiting the apartment. In a desperate attempt to cover up his crime, he jumped into a pond, making it painfully obvious that he was trying to flee his own guilt. His trial was tense, with prosecutors painting him as a cold-blooded killer devoid of remorse, while his defense team tried to argue insanity. But the evidence was overwhelming. His lack of remorse, his failed cover-up, and his evasive answers in court all pointed to his guilt. The jury wasted no time convicting him on 2 counts of second-degree murder and armed burglary, and the judge did not hold back in sentencing. The pain in the courtroom was palpable as the families of Trey and Jordan clung to each other for support, their grief unbearable. Assistant State Attorney Sarah Thomas delivered a powerful argument, demanding 3 consecutive life sentences and calling Kemp a ruthless killer with no regard for human life. Yet even in the face of irrefutable evidence, Kemp refused to take responsibility, insisting he hadn't committed the crime.
What upset me was I'm sorry for her loss, just as well as mine. My son was supposed to graduate this year too.
Judge Leah saw right through Kemp's defense and had no patience for his claims of insanity. In her mind, there was no doubt. Kemp was a dangerous individual who needed to be locked away for life. And just like that, his fate was sealed with 3 consecutive life sentences, ensuring he would never see the outside world again. But the real tragedy wasn't his sentencing. It was the devastating loss of 2 young men, full of promise and hope, whose lives were stolen by someone they had once tried to help. And now, onto the case of Bisa Bustamante, a story so chilling it will shake you to the core.
God! 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 God!
In 2009, in a small town in Missouri, 15-year-old Alyssa Bustamante committed a horrifying crime that left the community in shock. She lured her 9-year-old neighbor, Elizabeth, into the woods and brutally ended her life, an unthinkable betrayal, given that Elizabeth trusted her completely. It all started when Elizabeth's younger sister, Emma, asked if she could come outside to play. Their mother agreed, reminding Elizabeth to be home by 6 p.m., but she never returned. Instead, Alyssa convinced her to follow her into a wooded area nearby, claiming she had something to show her. Once there, things took a terrifying turn. Alyssa strangled Elizabeth, stabbed her multiple times, and buried her in a shallow grave. The sheer brutality of the act was unfathomable, especially given how young they both were. As panic spread throughout the neighborhood, desperate searches for Elizabeth began, with no one realizing she was already gone. Alyssa even warned her sister Emma to stay silent, and out of fear, Emma obeyed. But as days passed, the investigation intensified. Suspicion soon turned to Alyssa after her sister revealed she had been with Elizabeth that day, and her increasingly unsettling behavior only raised more red flags.
God! 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 God!
When the cops asked her about a shallow hole in the woods, she casually admitted that she dug it for fun. They also found disturbing stuff on her social media accounts, like references to violence, and it only got worse when they found her diary Alyssa had written about how much she enjoyed killing. Elizabeth, she even described it as amazing and enjoyable when the cops finally caught up with her. Alyssa confessed to the murder and led them to the grave, where she had hidden Elizabeth. Everyone was in shock, especially her family, because no one could believe someone so young could do something like that to a friend at her trial. Alyssa initially pleaded not guilty, but eventually changed her plea to guilty. The diary entries were read out in court, and that just solidified how cold and twisted the whole thing.
Yeah. Oh.
Grandma.
Oh my God.
Alyssa was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole, plus 30 years for the armed criminal action charge. However, Elizabeth's mother was not satisfied with the verdict, believing that Alyssa should never be released. During the sentencing hearing, she made her anger and pain clear. While Alyssa did express some remorse, which was surprising given the cold and disturbing entries in her diary, Elizabeth's family couldn't find it in their hearts to forgive her for taking their daughter's life in such a horrific manner. This case is truly disturbing, and trying to understand how Alyssa could commit such an act against someone she knew is mind-boggling. It serves as a chilling reminder that evil knows no age. Thanks for joining us today. Be sure to check out our other videos for more gripping real-life courtroom stories.